Good evening. I'm Yamisha Sunder coming to you from the NBC News headquarters in New York. And here are some of the stories we're following now tonight. Rescuers are still combing through the rubble, desperately looking for survivors after a powerful earthquake felt across 6 countries, leaves thousands dead. The U.S. and China engage in a diplomatic war of words over the Chinese spy balloon shot down by the Pentagon.
What China did was unacceptable. We protected civilians, and we gained more intel while protecting our own sensitive information.
A neo-Nazi fresh out of prison is arrested for plotting to blow up a Baltimore power grid. Embattled Republican Congressman George Santos has been accused of sexual harassment by a former aide. And Beyonce tickets go on sale. Will the Beehive suffer the same fate as the Swifties and wait online for hours only to have tickets disappear from their carts? Rescue efforts are underway in southern Turkey and neighboring Syria after not one but 2 massive earthquakes hit the region early today. The first one was a 7.8 in magnitude. The second one was 7.5 in magnitude. Nearly 4,000 people have been killed and nearly 15,000 have been injured in both regions. The death toll is expected to rise dramatically in coming days. You can see some of what crews are dealing with out there. Buildings crumbled, streets covered in debris and dust, and an unknown number of people trapped in the rubble. The earthquake was felt across the Middle East, with tremors felt as far as Egypt and Israel. Turkey's president announced that the country will observe 7 days of national mourning. Meanwhile, aid is pouring in from dozens of countries, including NATO, the European Union, and the United States. Today, President Biden said he is, quote, deeply saddened by the loss of life and devastation caused by the earthquake. A State Department spokesperson also confirmed earlier today that the U.S. will be sending search and rescue teams to aid Turkey in coming days.
2 teams, 2 rescue and recovery teams that will be traveling to Turkey in the coming days, 2 teams of 78 individuals. It is our fervent hope that the rescue and recovery effort is able to save as many lives, to pull people from the rubble, to focus on that near-term priority, to stabilize buildings, to pull people, and to, again, potentially save as many lives as possible.
Teams from Virginia and Los Angeles are being deployed right now to assist Turkey, according to USAID. NBC News foreign correspondent Matt Bradley has more from Turkey.
Well, I'm in Düzce, Turkey. We're actually at a highway rest stop. We're driving down towards that earthquake zone, and we are not alone. As a matter of fact, here at this rest stop, we've been seeing earth movers and essentially mobile homes that are on their way down to that earthquake zone. We've even seen what looked like a fleet of ambulances. This whole country is mobilizing to try to help out the people who have been affected and who are actually, many of them, still underneath the rubble of this historically awful earthquake. This is on a par with some of the worst earthquakes that have ever been recorded in Turkey. But we have to remember, while the epicenter was in this country, much of the shockwaves and much of the effects were in neighboring Syria, a country that has now been hit twice. First, by more than a decade of war, which saw hundreds of thousands of people displaced, and many of those people have now been displaced once again by this horrific earthquake. Now, there are lots of things to worry about, even for those who have survived or have been rescued from the effects of this earthquake. One of the main ones are the aftershocks, and we saw another aftershock about 12 hours after the initial one that was almost as powerful as that incredibly powerful first hit. But now we're also seeing, as you can see here, very wet, snowy, very cold winter weather. That's going to be a challenge for rescue workers who are trying to recover people from the wreckage, and also for those who have survived, not just here in Turkey, where there are a lot of resources available for people. This is a country that is used to earthquakes and natural disasters, but more so in neighboring Syria. Again, a place that has been ravaged by war. That's a country where people will be twice homeless, and a place where rescue workers and where international aid agencies will be struggling to meet a rising demand and a sky-high casualty toll. Matt Bradley, NBC News, Düzce, Turkey.
Just devastating and so heartbreaking to see that. Matt, thank you so much for that report. And two new videos have been released in connection with the deadly shooting of a double amputee in California. 36-year-old Anthony Lowe was shot multiple times by Huntington Park police last month. In one of the videos released today, we got a new angle of the confrontation between Lowe and responding officers. At the time, Lowe was carrying a knife as he tried to hobble away. Officers claim he, quote, threatened to advance or throw the knife. That knife was used in an earlier stabbing. The second video released today appears to show that stabbing. Lowe appears to lunge out of his wheelchair with a knife and stab a man in the chest. Shortly after these videos were released, Anthony Lowe's mother spoke at a news conference questioning the actions of officers.
They supposed to protect and serve us, and they shot my son 11 times, and they never called me and told me anything about what happened to my child. They go home at night with their families, and I have to know that the people supposed to protect and serve us killed my son. I just want truth and justice.
And clearly a heartbroken mother there. So Nayela Charles joins me now. So Nayela, tell us, what are the police saying? What's the latest about the investigation? And what more do we learn from these videos?
Yamiche, the video Huntington Park police released today from a nearby business shows a fuller picture of what happened. This new footage shows the key moment Anthony Lowe, a double amputee and stabbing suspect, was killed. In it, you see officers approach Lowe and pull the wheelchair out from underneath him. He appears to move away from officers, then faces them, appearing to swing a knife twice before officers fatally shoot him. That part where Lowe faces officers is not visible in the social media video shared last week that sparked nationwide outrage. Officers say leading up to the shooting, they deployed two separate tasers twice in an attempt to stop him, but the tasers were ineffective. And they also released the video of the stabbing that spurred all of this. It shows Lowe minutes before his confrontation with police stabbed someone on the sidewalk while out of his wheelchair. At last check, police say that stabbing victim is in stable condition. That victim, whose lung was punctured, spoke to Good Day LA exclusively and said he didn't know Lowe. Yamiche?
Just a tough situation, Nayela. And I wonder if you could talk about Lowe's mother, who says she called police hours before all of this took place. Tell us more about that call.
Lowe's family says he was suffering from mental issues since losing his legs just months ago. Lowe's mother tells us the morning of the shooting, she called police because Lowe was off. She says they spoke to him for half an hour, then told her he just needed some fresh air. She says after that, Lowe took off and the stabbing and shooting happened. This is what she said after the police press conference, that they wouldn't allow family to attend. And also important to note, this was the first time family saw that video today as well. Take a listen.
I want them to go to jail. I want them to lose their job with no pay.
The police chief says the involved officers are on paid administrative leave. Yamiche?
There's so much more we want to know about this. I know that this shooting sparked a national outcry against the use of force against a person with disabilities. We saw multiple protests over the weekend. So how are organizers planning to have more demonstrations? What are you hearing about what people are talking about and planning to do?
Well, we haven't gotten any word of any future demonstrations yet, but some community activists are still saying the shooting wasn't justified. And we know the family's attorney is still arguing that, too. They're also calling for the Huntington Park Police Department to get body cameras since they don't have any. The police chief says an investigation by a different law enforcement agency will determine if officers' actions there were justified, and the district attorney will determine if those officers will be charged. Yamiche?
Well, Nayela, it's so great to talk to you as you, of course, break all this down. It's such important reporting. Thank you so much. And good news out of Ohio today. Norfolk Transportation says it successfully performed a controlled chemical release on the train that recently derailed, hopefully preventing a dangerous explosion. Now, officials were really concerned about this crash because at least 5 train cars contained a highly flammable and potentially cancerous chemical known as vinyl chloride, which, if handled improperly, could be deadly. The train derailed near the village of East Palestine. Late Friday night, evacuations began for everyone within a 1-mile radius of the crash after a massive fire erupted. The evacuations included people in parts of Ohio and Pennsylvania. Earlier today, Governor Mike DeWine made it clear that evacuations were absolutely mandatory.
The controlled release of the toxic chemicals also has the potential to be deadly if inhaled. Those in the red area are facing grave danger of death.
NBC News correspondent Ron Allen joins us now from Columbiana, Ohio. So, Ron, how did this controlled chemical release go?
It went well, according to the railroad company. They say the operation was successful. Basically, what they did was they used some small explosive charges in the 5 cars in question. Now, it was a 150-car train. 50 of those cars derailed, but there were 5 of them that contained this hazardous chemical, vinyl chloride. That was the concern. They said it had become unstable for the last 72 hours. Officials here were concerned about a massive explosion that they said could have spread shrapnel for more than a mile and toxic fumes as well. And during those days, they were hoping that this situation would essentially resolve itself. There are release valves in the train cars that weren't working, and so essentially they released the material with explosives, setting off a huge plume of smoke and the material leaking out of the train car, into ditches that they had dug and that they turned into fire pits. And that's what's been going on for the past number of hours. They're letting this material burn off in a controlled way, and apparently this is the end of this crisis. We haven't gotten it all clear yet, but this was the hope. This is what they were trying to do, because there was a lot of concern if left unattended, or emergency workers couldn't get to the train because it was so unstable, thought to be so unstable, that they had to take matters into their own hands. And this is what they did, and they said it's been a success.
This sounds like a potentially dangerous situation. So explain to folks, what is vinyl chloride and what special precautions in particular did authorities take to try to handle it?
Well, we saw guys in hazmat suits. We saw the workers that couldn't get to the train and were keeping their distance from it for the last number of days because this chemical is so volatile. As I understand it, it's used to make plastics like PVC pipes and the vinyl material in some cars and utensils, plastic utensils that you would get at a restaurant or somewhere. That's the kind of material. But there are warnings that prolonged, intense exposure to this material could cause cancer, according to the CDC. So that was the fear, that the smoke from this fire wafting out over this community was a potential hazard. They created an evacuation zone of a mile, and they were very serious about it, a mile radius from this train. There were police going door to door in recent days telling people to get out. They were telling families that had children, if you don't take your children away, we could arrest you because this is so serious. And then when they did this controlled explosion, controlled release operation, the governor here said this is a matter of life and death, because essentially they were releasing this chemical into the ground and causing smoke and fire and flames. So it was a controlled explosive. They did it. They wanted to do it during daylight and when the weather conditions were appropriate, they said. There were people here from the EPA, from the National Guard, from the DOD, the Department of Defense here was helping as well. It was such a serious situation. Remember, this is a massive train. There were literally hundreds of thousands of pounds of this chemical in these cars and these train cars. And again, they had been warning about a potentially catastrophic explosion, and that has apparently been averted.
Well, an incredible situation there. And as you said, a matter of life or death. Hope everyone stays safe. So thank you so much, Ron. After the break, a look at the U.S. and China's deflating relationship. That's right, I said it. We're talking all things balloon after the break. Today, naval teams off the coast of South Carolina are searching a 7-mile radius for debris from the Chinese spy balloon shot down on Saturday. That debris could unlock clues about what exactly China was up to. The U.S. is confident the balloon was designed for surveillance to monitor sensitive military sites. But China maintains this was all a big accident and that downing the balloon is, quote, an obvious overreaction and a serious violation of international customary practice. Meanwhile, the political fallout is escalating on Capitol Hill. Some lawmakers are demanding more information and others are expressing outrage that the president seemingly waited days to act. NBC's Kelly O'Donnell has more from the White House.
Good evening, Yamiche. The White House is dealing with the fallout after the downing of that Chinese spy balloon. And there are lots of different areas here. It's the U.S. diplomacy with China, an already tense relationship. It's the domestic issue of the political situation. The president has been facing criticism, namely from Republicans, over this. And today we've been learning more from White House officials about what was happening behind the scenes. What did they know? What were they evaluating? And how were they trying to gain intelligence on the Chinese once they identified this spy craft in the air? Now, the president was facing criticism over the timing of his decision. He was very direct with reporters over the weekend, saying he had notified the Pentagon of his decision on Wednesday that they should shoot it down as soon as that was safe to do. And the response from the Pentagon was that that needed to happen not while it was over land, where it could potentially cause damage on the ground, perhaps the loss of life. We learned today just how large this spy balloon was, where officials described it as holding the space of 15 football fields by 15 football fields, also weighing 2,000 pounds, a considerable size that they were trying to stress if that were to come down in a populated area, there would clearly be damage, and also damage to the equipment itself that they were hoping to pull some intelligence from and learn about the Chinese program. The Republican criticism that was coming over the weekend from senators and members of Congress has been about the president's timing and judgment. And here's some of what Republicans had to say.
The U.S. had to see this coming and decided they couldn't or wouldn't do anything about it early on.
Imagine how this would have played out if nobody had taken any pictures of the balloon, if nobody in Montana had looked up and noticed this giant balloon.
The president was paralyzed for an entire week by a balloon.
The president taking it down over the Atlantic is sort of like the quarterback, sort of like tackling the quarterback after the game is over.
The White House is also telling us that it has known about the Chinese spy fleet of these balloons for some time and had, in fact, been briefing Congress, including a briefing last August about the existence of this program from China. And so some members of Congress, according to the White House, were aware of the existence of this program. And also during the period of time when the White House was aware that this balloon had moved into the potential of U.S. airspace, that some of the top leaders on Capitol Hill had been notified. And now officials here say that they are also planning further briefings to bring Congress into the loop on what has been learned so far and what they hope to discover. One of the other things they've told us is that they have learned after the fact that the balloon program was in existence during the prior administration when President Trump was here, and that there were incursions of these Chinese spy balloons during his presidency, but that was not known until after he left office. So the White House is preparing to have limited briefings with key former leaders of the Trump administration to share what intelligence they now have about what was happening during their time in office. So there are a lot of developing situations here. When the president came back from Camp David today, I asked him a question among the reporters gathered on the South Lawn. Would he plan to shoot down this spy balloon under any circumstances, or did he only do that because it became public? This, of course, was a secret spy kind of program, nothing that we had been aware of until people saw it with the naked eye, saw it on video. And he said, no, it was always his intention to shoot it down. And he said that was his plan all along. Those are some of the developments we've been following here from the White House. Yamiche, back to you.
Definitely lots of politics when it comes to this balloon fallout. So thank you, Kelly O'Donnell, for that report. Now let's bring in Colonel Jack Jacobs. He's a Medal of Honor recipient and an NBC News military analyst. So thank you for being here. So first question really is on national security. Did this balloon definitively compromise U.S. national security, or maybe do we not know that?
We don't know that. We won't know for sure until after we will have recovered some of the debris from the debris field in the Atlantic Ocean. We do know that these balloons are used to listen to radio, telephone conversations, and generally take photographs and send all this information back to China. We don't know what they sent, and we won't know until we get to the equipment, if we can. On the other hand, we have the capability of blinding these things and jamming their radio transmissions back. And so it's entirely possible that they didn't get all the things that they wanted to get.
Definitely a lot of questions there. I also want to play for you Ned Price, who's the spokesperson for the U.S. Department of State. Take a listen to what he said.
We know it's the most consequential. We know it's the most complex relationship we have in all of our bilateral relationships. We suspect it's also the most consequential and complex bilateral relationship on the face of the earth.
So strong words there. And we know that the Secretary of State has already postponed, maybe even canceled his trip to China. Where does the United States and China go from here?
Well, this is a difficult period, actually, for Xi. He's just at the peak of his career, having just been extended for an unprecedented third term. He's probably going to be in charge for as long as he cares to be, or people who work for him care him to be. We have a very close relationship, economic relationship with China, and that's also complex. The United States is now going to play very, very cagey with China and use this as a proper pretext for ensuring that our security is not compromised again. We heard that these balloons have been going over the United States before, at least 3 times. Don't forget, it's very difficult to detect these things except visually. They have a low radar signature. They don't have a very strong, or they have no infrared signature, so it's extremely difficult to detect them. You can only detect them usually visually from the ground or from satellites above them. You can bet that we're going to have satellites that are going to be focused almost exclusively on the transit of balloons like this across the Pacific, so that we can intercept them before they get to American soil. But in the relationship with China, this is an extremely interesting and difficult time for China. They have a lot of problems internally. And when they have a lot of problems internally, in the past, they've frequently struck out against their perceived adversaries. So these will be interesting times certainly for the next few weeks.
It's certainly interesting times. And as you reported, that you talked about this isn't the first balloon. NBC News can report that there are at least 3 Chinese spy balloons flew over the U.S. during the Trump administration, and Politico reports that the Department of Defense tracks hundreds of balloons every day. So I want to dig in here. How common do we know this could be? How common could this be?
Very common indeed. The large majority of balloons that are sent aloft are benign. They're sent by a variety of nation states and extra-governmental organizations. They're research balloons, weather patterns, doing geographical analysis, and so on, and they're benign. Usually, we discover these kinds of objects and are concerned about them when they're maneuverable. Increasingly, unfortunately, even benign balloons have become maneuverable, and so it's extremely difficult to distinguish between those that are benign and those that are not. It's easy to pick up aircraft, fixed wing and rotary winged aircraft. A lot of them have to register and so on, and they're easy to pick up with radar and other means. Balloons are much more difficult, and the more technology makes them more maneuverable, the more difficult it's going to be to pick them up.
Just an incredible and fascinating development that we're talking about, these Chinese spy balloons and the fact that there are possibly hundreds of them. Thank you so much for your insight and your analysis, Colonel Jacobs. And after the break, a foiled plot, how authorities prevented an attack on Baltimore's power grid. Plus, Congressman George Santos facing yet another allegation, this time of sexual harassment. We have a report from Capitol Hill. And it's time to get information. Today, all eyes were on Ticketmaster for the Beyonce tour. We'll look at what changes were made to avoid a repeat of the Taylor Swift chaos. That's all just ahead. It's time now for some of the big headlines we're watching tonight. First up, the Alec Murdaugh double murder trial. Today, the judge ruled that evidence of his alleged financial crimes will be allowed to be used in this trial. That's a huge win for the prosecution team, who argued Murdaugh killed his wife and son in an attempt to cover up his financial misdeeds. Florida lawmakers will vote this week on the future of the Reedy Creek Improvement District. That's a special tax district that Walt Disney World currently sits within, giving Disney a lot of power. And you might remember last year, Republican Governor Ron DeSantis voiced his criticisms over the district. A new bill would keep it going as an oversight district. It would be managed by 5 people handpicked by the governor himself. In a major calendar shakeup, South Carolina will now be the first state to hold presidential primaries for Democrats come 2024. The Democratic National Committee voted to approve the change this weekend, dethroning Iowa and New Hampshire from their previous first stop positions. The decision aims to promote more diverse states earlier in the primary process. And we're learning more about a close call at the Austin airport over the weekend. 2 planes narrowly avoided collision Saturday after air traffic controllers cleared the arriving and departing flights on the same runway. Federal officials report the planes were within 100 feet of each other. And Google announces its artificial intelligence chatbot. It's called Bard, and it's expected to rival ChatGPT, the widely popular AI service created by OpenAI. Bard will be first released to, quote, trusted testers before rolling out to the general public. The FBI says they have stopped a plot to attack the power grid in Baltimore. Prosecutors say one of the suspects is a known neo-Nazi. Today in court, prosecutors say suspects Brandon Russell and Sarah Clendaniel were planning to shoot multiple electrical substations in the Baltimore area with the intent to, quote, destroy the city. Both suspects are being charged with destruction of an energy facility, which is a felony. Officials described the plot as racially motivated. One of the suspects, Brandon Russell, is the founder of a neo-Nazi group that aims to cause, quote, collapse of civilization, according to the Southern Poverty Law Center. The arrests come after several successful attacks on power grids across the country late last year. NBC's senior legal correspondent, Laura Jarrett, joins me now. So, Laura, thanks so much for being here. So how did the FBI track down these suspects and ultimately stop this plot, which seems like it could have been catastrophic?
Yeah, Yamisha, I think that's fair to say. This was a serious plot. If it had actually come to fruition, it would have been devastating for the people of Maryland. It appears that federal authorities really zeroed in on this pair through the use of a federal confidential informant, something that is used every day in law enforcement. And this particular case proved to be quite helpful to their case. They were having a number of conversations with this person, dating as far back as last summer, at least in the case of Brandon Russell. He was laying out plans, giving instructions, encouraging this person to target critical infrastructure, as you laid out, using basically just open source material, using Google Maps, but also providing instruction. And then through this other person that he met while he was in prison on totally different charges, Sarah Clendaniel, she's actually having conversations about procuring a gun, ammunition. She also has something of a manifesto. She doesn't call it a manifesto, but authorities found it through the process of a search warrant, where she says things to the effect of the perfect time to hit some substations and knock out power. So the accusations here are quite serious. They are facing a conspiracy charge, as you laid out, which carries up to 20 years in prison if convicted, Yamish.
Such serious things that they were planning. How close did they get to actually carrying this out, do we know?
It's one of the open questions here, and one of the other ones is sort of how exactly they zeroed in on them. Some of the conversations that you see from the criminal complaint today are from the January, February time period, really late January, if you will. But it's unclear exactly what was the spark, what steps they took, which authorities managed to let them zero in and decide this was the time to arrest them. We know that they were arrested without incident at some point last week. They made their first first appearance in court today. But other than actually talking about buying the guns, it doesn't appear that they actually did buy one in connection with this. It appears at least one of the suspects was armed. But again, it's unclear exactly what made them act right now.
And Laura, I want to ask you also about the context here. In December, 2 electrical substations were attacked in central North Carolina. At the peak of outages, more than 45,000 homes and businesses were in the dark. That incident was followed by attacks at 4 electricity substations on Christmas weekend near Tacoma, Washington. Is there any connection here? What more do we know about whether or not this could be a bigger, even people sort of working across state lines here?
Yeah, that was one of the other questions for authorities today at the press conference. And they were asked in that specific question, and they said these two, this pair, didn't seem to be connected to some sort of larger plot, but the investigation continues. We know that those North Carolina shootings, obviously devastating for the tens of thousands of residents who were left without powder. And I should mention those suspect are still on the loose in that case. In fact, the FBI just put out a bulletin last week offering $50,000 for any information for anyone who can come forward with information on those shootings in North Carolina. But this particular pair does not appear to be connected so far, Yamiche.
And as you said, the investigation in the Baltimore case is continuing. Conspiracy to destroy an energy facility is a serious federal offense. So what more do we know about what comes next legally here? How much jail time they could possibly be facing if found guilty?
Yeah, it's a serious offense. It's a felony, up to 20 years in prison if convicted. But we are a long ways off from there. I should say they just made their first appearance here. They haven't entered any plea. They just got public defenders. So we still have a long road to go here. But the next thing you will see is what's known as a preliminary hearing, in which the prosecution essentially has a put up or shut up moment where they will have to explain to the judge why these two people have probable cause to be held. So look out for that next, Yamiche.
Well, we'll definitely keep looking out for that and keep looking out for your reporting. Thank you so much, Laura Jarrett.
Sure.
Tonight, George Santos, the Republican freshman congressman from New York, is facing new allegations. He is now being accused of ethics violations and sexual harassment by Derek Myers, a former prospective congressional aide. That is according to this letter sent to the House Ethics Committee by Myers, which he also posted on Twitter himself. That was first reported by the New York Times, and NBC News has not independently verified the claims yet. In the letter, Myers is accusing Santos of groping him when he worked in his office as a volunteer. He is also requesting an investigation into whether correct procedure was followed related to his work as a volunteer in the office. NBC News senior congressional correspondent Garrett Haake joins me now. So, Garrett, thanks for being here. There's obviously a lot we don't know about this allegation, but what do we know so far, and what's the House Ethics Committee saying?
Well, Yamiche, everything about this story is bizarre. Myers describes being hired on kind of a probationary basis. He says he was working on an unpaid basis as a volunteer in Santos's office when he was groped on a couch while discussing legislative correspondence with Santos. All of this came out sometime later after Myers says he was let go from the office over unrelated claims about concern over his past work as a journalist, where he faces wiretapping charges in Ohio. The only reason we know about this claim at all is because he tweeted about it, although a member of the House Ethics Committee has confirmed that they've received this letter. They don't confirm they're investigating it. We do not know the status of any investigation by the House Ethics Committee. They tend to keep things very close to the vest. But obviously a serious allegation here, one added on top of so many of other Santos problems, both legally and politically, since he joined this Congress this year.
And Garrett, you said it, there's a lot of allegations here. Of course, this is a new allegation coming from this volunteer. What has George Santos or his office said about this particular allegation?
Well, Santos was asked about this by a CNN producer today, and he said he denied it 100%. He called the allegations comical. Now, I don't think Santos or anyone in his camp is laughing about them, given the seriousness of their nature here. And the challenge for Santos is that he has denied so many other things that have later been found to be true. He has a problem with credibility on other issues. But in this case, he denies it outright, says it's 100% not true. We will see whether the Ethics Committee or perhaps Capitol Police take further action on this. But again, neither body is confirming any kind of investigation tonight, Yamiche.
Well, serious situation. Thank you so much, Garrett Haake. And the Beehive is buzzing. If you're one of the lucky Beyonce fans who nabbed tickets today, well, put your hands up. Today, thousands of lucky fans who were given pre-sale codes put their faith in Ticketmaster in order to secure a ticket. According to Ticketmaster, fan demand exceeded available tickets by more than 800% in certain cities. That prompted Beyonce to announce additional tour dates. I'm not mad at that. And many fans went into the pre-sale incredibly concerned after the pre-sale for Taylor Swift's upcoming tour left thousands of fans unhappy and even prompted Ticketmaster to cancel the public sale. The Beyonce pre-sale also comes on the heels of a big night of wins for Queen Bee. The singer was awarded her record-breaking 32nd Grammy Award. NBC News technology correspondent Jake Ward joins us now. And Jake, thank you for being here. Tell us, of course, how did the pre-sales go for Beyonce? Was it better or worse than the Taylor Swift fiasco?
Well, Yamiche, we were all, of course, fingers crossed, sort of white-knuckling it going into this, and I'm sure the leadership at Ticketmaster felt the same way. And today, it seems to have gone more smoothly. Ticketmaster seems to have ironed out some problems. We've heard reports that, for the most part, it was pretty simple. This is not to say, of course, that people were able to get tickets in every case. Ticketmaster reports that, huge numbers of people wanted these tickets, as much as 800% more people wanted them than tickets were available. That said, it seems to have gone pretty smoothly so far.
Really interesting that it's gone more smoothly. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about what Ticketmaster possibly did differently this time.
Well, I mean, on the one hand, it is a technological improvement, right, in that basically last time with Taylor Swift, they sort of flooded the market. They just released all the tickets for all the shows in all the cities all at once, and as a result, flooded their own servers. That's what analysts seem to have, have pointed out to us. So that's, on the one hand, a tremendous improvement. The other way to think about it is, the job is just selling what people want to buy. You know what I mean? And so was it that much of a technological improvement to actually have been able to deliver on what the market was asking for? Not exactly clear. But, at this point, it seems as if this idea of creating a multi-tiered system in which you, just sort of sell in waves, city by city, rather than just letting everything go all at once and the consequences be damned, seems to have been the technological fix that hopefully will be the model going forward.
And even though, obviously, as you said, this looks like it's going to maybe be the model going forward, Ticketmaster, it isn't out of the woods just yet. And for those who know Taylor Swift, that was a Taylor Swift pun. That being said, the Senate Judiciary Committee, it held a hearing last month to examine the website, Ticketmaster's website, and their dominance over the ticketing industry. So talk a bit about the monopoly that it seems like they still have.
Well, this is the thing, right, that everybody has been watching for. I mean, in this country, we have a certain tolerance for a certain category of monopoly, right? These permitted monopolies, like, let's say, the utilities that you and I pay for providing electricity or water and the rest of it. Those are monopolies, but they are permitted because they provide this very essential function that requires huge, huge infrastructure. And so they, are allowed to operate, but under very, very tight regulations and price caps and the rest of it. Ticketmaster is not like that, right? Ticketmaster, in theory, operates in a free and open market, but it enjoys a 70 to 80% market dominant position. I mean, it is impossible. We've been working all day to try to figure out who is the second player in the list, and it is not entirely clear. They are so huge and so dominant, and because of their merger with Ticketmaster and Live Nation, which is the venue company between them, they own what an academic would say is a vertical trust, right? That's the thing that antitrust and monopoly law is all about. Like, you're not supposed to be able to own the ticket selling and the venue and the management of the bands and the rest of it. So, as you mentioned, the Senate Judiciary Committee took a very hard look at this after the Taylor Swift fiasco, and when the Beyonce sales began here, they actually tweeted at Ticketmaster and said, "We are watching." So this was a very big deal for Ticketmaster today, and we'll see whether or not having done a much smoother job with this one gets them out of hot water, or if another problem is just on the horizon, and as a result, they'll wind up back in front of Congress again.
Well, a situation we'll definitely keep covering. And I should say congratulations to all the fellow Beehive members who got their tickets today. Jacob Ward, thanks so much for being here. Coming up, Snapchat and fentanyl. Families who lost loved ones to drug overdoses are now blaming social media. The key question now, how responsible should apps be when it comes to cracking down on drug deals? But first, honoring Black history. Tonight, we remember legendary tennis player Arthur Ashe, who passed away on this date in 1993. He became the first African American to win the U.S. Open on September 9th, 1968, and the first to win Wimbledon on July 5th, 1975. Off the court, Arthur Ashe is remembered for his extensive work to educate the public about HIV and AIDS. This was after Ashe became HIV positive from a blood transfusion during his heart surgery.
AIDS patients are not to be pitied. None of us want pity. We do want compassion.
Snapchat is facing a growing legal battle. Families who lost their children after they took pills containing fentanyl are accusing the company of making it easy to buy drugs due to the platform's disappearing messages. Reporter Eric Wilkinson from our NBC affiliate in Seattle has more.
Attorneys say Snapchat has become the delivery system of choice for drug dealers pushing their products into young hands.
Oh yeah, there we go.
1 year ago, an overdose survivor showed us just how easy it is, finding a connection on his cell phone in just a matter of moments, one willing to deliver to his house.
It was pretty much Amazon for drugs.
The Snapchat app permits dealers to deliver drugs directly to teens anonymously, everything from Adderall to OxyContin. Many of the pills, though, are counterfeits, containing deadly doses of fentanyl.
There's counterfeit Percocet, counterfeit OxyContin, counterfeit Adderall.
One of those pills killed Carol Schweigert's son, Trey. For the past 5 years, she's been fighting for awareness, but it hasn't come easily.
There's lives lost every single day, and the battle's been uphill.
According to the CDC, fentanyl kills 150 Americans every single day. Now, a Seattle law firm is going after the company with a class action lawsuit, saying this isn't a social media problem, it's specifically a Snapchat problem.
Fentanyl is so poisonous.
Matthew Bergman with the Social Media Victims Law Center says his firm is representing the families of 52 children who've died from fentanyl overdoses. He says all of them got the drug via Snapchat.
That's not an accident. That's because Snapchat is explicitly designed to evade oversight and parental responsibility.
Good morning, everyone.
A campaign to clamp down on Snapchat and other social media companies is being spearheaded by Washington Congresswoman Kathy McMorris Rodgers. She's seeking to narrow liability protections for tech companies and widen them for children.
We must take an all-hands-on-deck approach to preventing the sale and transfer of these illegal drugs on these platforms to prevent one more child from dying.
So we just keep working at it every day.
This as moms like Carol Schweigert continue their relentless battle burning on the home front.
It will never bring back our loved ones, but holding people accountable is important to do because otherwise it's just going to keep going on.
Eric Wilkinson, King 5 News.
Really important reporting. Eric Wilkinson from our NBC affiliate in Seattle. Thank you. And it's a familiar story. He wanted something romantic. She, on the other hand, said she only saw him as a friend. Here's the unfamiliar part. He's now suing her for $2 million because she friend-zoned him. This is happening in Singapore, according to court documents. The man claims the rejection has, quote, caused him sustained trauma, leading to a dip in his earning capacity. The woman is contesting the $2.3 million lawsuit, which is scheduled to be heard in Singapore's High Court next week. The Washington Post points out that, quote, the lawsuit illustrates a challenge faced by women around the world, that men sometimes feel entitled to their affection. Just an incredible situation. Kristen Gibbons-Fendon is an MSNBC legal analyst, and she joins me now. Kristen, this is a confusing and sort of hard story to even understand that it's in the courts. What are the chances of this man seeing a dime from the legal action he's taking against this woman for simply not wanting to be in a relationship with him?
You know, based on your last segment, I think I might have a better chance of scoring Beyonce tickets than this man getting a dime out of this lawsuit. And that's because there simply is just no merit here. There is no legally recognized harm in being placed in the friend zone. And quite frankly, this lawsuit is so ridiculous in the States and even as it is posed currently in Singapore, that if there wasn't a victim on the other side being harassed and being intimidated, the meritless nature of this suit would be laughable.
I mean, it's so true that there really is someone that's being targeted here. I want to ask you, though, that there's a gender advocacy group in Singapore that's calling out this man's sense of entitlement and says that he really believes that his actions constitute harassment. At this point, has this crossed the line, and can the courts in Singapore do anything about it?
You know, the court in Singapore kind of did do something about it by throwing out his prior lawsuit. But looking at this case on an individual basis, I wouldn't be surprised if the court did dismiss this lawsuit just like it did the prior one. But what we really want is an institutional change. And I think that's really the shift that people are looking for. And in the last 5 years, for example, the Prime Minister of Singapore was actually successful in 2 defamation suits that he brought against 2 of his critics. So unfortunately in Singapore, and quite frankly in the States as well, the claim of defamation is often weaponized to silence and intimidate victims and survivors. Just like what it's doing now, we're hopeful that, you know, the courts will keep dismissing it. But again, it needs to be an institutional change, not just an individual change.
And you bring up the issue of intimidation. I'm wondering what more we know about this woman's thinking, whether or not she's concerned, or maybe even that there should be concern there, that this might turn into something even more sinister, given the fact that she had to already get a restraining order against this man.
Yeah, you know, we have little knowledge of the facts of everything underlying this. But the fact that she went and sought out a restraining order is indicative of how fearful she feels for her own personal safety. And that is extremely important. Think about it this way. Not only did this man weaponize the court system once against her, but twice. And she knows him from being in a friend relationship with him. So she knows what's best for her personal safety, and her actions indicate such.
Yeah. Yeah, well, this is, I mean, a case we're going to have to definitely keep watching. MSNBC legal analyst Christine Gibbons-Fendon, thank you so much for making the time to be here.
My pleasure.
And before we go, tonight's Inspiring America, a daughter's mission to complete her late father's bucket list. Finally tonight, meet the woman who continued a powerful bond with her father even after his death, thanks to a chance discovery. Michael Carney stashed his bucket list in a brown suede bag, 60 things to complete in his lifetime, but he never had the chance to finish it. At 54 years old, he was killed by a distracted driver. So 13 years later, when his daughter Laura found that list,
it was just like, this feels important and this feels like something I need to do. And as soon as I thought of it, I saw my dad's face in the back of my mind, just smiling and nodding.
Several items on the list were checked off, but 54 remained. So Laura got to work. Swim the width of a river, drive a Corvette, skydive. She crisscrossed the U.S., visiting several cities, then made her way across the Atlantic to do the same.
I started developing this level of confidence in myself because I had this feeling like my dad's not going to let me fail.
For some items, Laura, a New Jersey native, was able to stay local. Down the street from her home, Laura planted an apple tree in this park, which is still growing.
Even though my dad's list is over, that's always going to live on.
One of the most daunting items, she says, have 5 songs recorded.
Many miles away.
She even traveled to Georgia to speak with former President Jimmy Carter in office when her father wrote the list.
It felt momentous. It felt like my dad was there.
It took 6 years, but Laura finally checked all the boxes and is writing a book about her experiences. What did it feel like when you finally completed this entire list?
You know, I felt calm. I felt fulfilled. I could let go of my father in the way that I wanted to. I'm also embracing my future.
Such an amazing story. And that does it for us. I'm Yamiche Alcindor for Now Tonight. The news continues right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.